Hello guys, I'm back with another video for you today, and this time I have some budget decks for those of you who don't have, super fleshed out collections. Now, these decks are going to be pretty much only using champions that you'll already have through the starter decks. But if you do have some, spare crafts with your wildcards and whatnot, then I'll also be, linking to my Mobalytics page where you can check out the deck guide themselves. And on those guides it will have a link to the full fleshed out deck with all the different champions and stuff that these decks are based off of. In the case of Aggro spiders and Elusives here, I don't have a sort of full list to give you, but work with what you've got. So more Darius, more Elise, more Zed in those decks is what you're going to be wanting if you want to play those. But yeah, for the most part these are going to be very, very cheap and easy to acquire if you have some of the commons, some of the rares in the different colours. So, where to start? Well, I think a good place to start would be budget scouts, since the scout deck is very, very good, and when it's fully fleshed out with Misfortune is very, very strong. But I think even without it, it's not too bad. And this is the list here, of course everything in the description, so check that if you want. And this is just a budget list which is, running a lot of really good value cards. For your bang for your buck, the Grizzled Rangers are really, really good cards, so that makes Demacia quite a strong faction, and you'll see that a lot of the regions that I'm using here involve Demacia, or rather a lot of the decks I'm using involve Demacia, you know what I mean. So Grizzled Ranger, very, very strong, so he's kind of the backbone of some of these decks. Good scouting unit, and of course with Crackshot Corsair, yeah, you maybe don't have the Misfortune because you're low on scraps, and she would be a very good addition here. To this deck, you can take out Greenfang Wardens, for example, and maybe one other card of your choosing to throw her in as a 3-of. You don't really need Quinn for these scouting decks, although she is a pretty nice card to run instead of something like Island Navigator, but that card kind of does the job of Quinn on some level with the scouting units. So this deck's really all about just rushing down the opponent with a lot of aggro units, and you'll find a lot of these cheap budget decks are aggro based. I have got a kind of more mid-rangey deck and a more controlling deck, so I'll show you those as well. But yeah, very aggro heavy this one, a lot of 1-drops, a lot of 2-drops, gonna just rush out onto the board, deal with the opponent's stuff by just attacking in, barrier on your guys, vulnerable on their guys, and really using the scout mechanic to just rush, and maybe even play a rally at the end with Citrus Courier or the Relentless Pursuit to kind of finish the game off. So you find this deck is pretty efficient, pretty good at doing what it does, and if you're facing opponents with a similar kind of built-up collection, you should be kind of rolling all over them with this kind of deck. So yeah, this is probably the strongest of the budget decks, I would imagine, although I have another one that I'm pretty interested in showing you that I think is quite strong. So with Demacia in mind, we also have MonoDemacia, where you only play Demacia and no other kind of colours with it, and that deck's pretty strong. The budget version is going to be quite a bit weaker because you don't run Fiora, presumably, if you don't have the gems to craft her, but you can still get away with it because Demacia has a lot of really powerful just generic cards, and Banner Man is a very good card, so you're able to run this guy, the Grizzled Ranger we already talked about, and just get a lot of value from each card that you play. Now if you have Garons, you can throw them in. I don't know how many you'll have, maybe you have 1, 2, 3, depending on how many you have. I think you start with 1, so that's why I've got 1 in here, but if you have more of those, you can throw them in. Take out maybe Radiant Guardians, although those are quite good, so potentially some of your kind of lower curve here, maybe you don't need Laurent Proteges, for example, and you can put some more Garons in for a bit more power, but yeah, maybe Radiant Guardians, because they're 5s as well, could be good to take out. But this deck will just get a lot of value, trade very efficiently, using the toughness and the single combat and everything like that. Now eventually, if you want to upgrade this deck, you want to play probably Fiora, and give her kind of immunity with this card down here, Unyielding Spirit. Stops her from dying, makes Fiora very good and very easy to win the game with, but that's kind of going to be quite expensive to include, so I'd recommend the Cythrias. They're very good. You can also throw them in Scouts if you want, probably as a 3-of, but depending on how many, epic wildcards and whatnot, maybe consider taking those out if you can't afford them, and running some more cheaper units, maybe more Guardians or more back-to-backs or something like that. But yeah, this deck should be pretty solid as well. Let's run into the Spider deck here. So this is a very, very budget deck. This is probably what I'd recommend as people like very just starting out, because a lot of this stuff is quite cheap, and you do start already off with a lot of the champions here, the double Darius and the double Elise, which are kind of key to the Spider Aggro archetype. Spider Aggro used to be really, really strong. It's not so strong anymore, especially when people are kind of anti-aggro a lot of the time. But this deck is still, pretty decent and will carry you through the early ranks, particularly if you have, maybe an extra Elise or an extra Darius or something that you feel like playing with, if you maybe got one in a pack or something. But yeah, this deck is just relying on spiders swarming out the board and kind of overwhelming the opponent using buffs like the Brothers Bond, etc. to finish stuff out. I think the version here actually is slightly different to the version that I have in the link, so keep that in mind. I think the one in the link is slightly more optimized with things like what's it called, Mark of the Isles and stuff. This one's a little bit, this was an earlier iteration of the budget deck, but yeah, this should be pretty solid for someone starting out and wanting to play kind of aggro Noxus and Shadow Isles. Alright, next up we have Budget Elusives. So this is a deck that's focused around kind of the Ionia elusive cards, and you use Demacia to supplement that and allow you to buff them and keep them alive very easily. Still got Grizzled Ranger because it's a really good card, but we're basically focusing on Solitary Monk and Standalone, using these two cards to kind of combo together and aggro the opponent down really quickly. Now often the play you want to make is not spend any mana turn 1 or turn 2 to go Solitary Monk, Standalone on turn 3, both in one turn, saving that mana for the Standalone. So that's going to be really, really threatening, and not a lot of decks can deal with that, especially early on. You'll probably roll over a lot of opponents just by doing that kind of combo. You've got Zed with Combat Tricks to kind of have a backup win condition, along with the other elusive units to maybe just smork down the opponent, rush them down. But yeah, this deck should do pretty decently. I don't have a kind of more fleshed out list. I guess you can add one more Zed. You can maybe play Fiora as well. That's something that elusives will often do as a secondary win condition. But yeah, pretty solid deck. And finally, probably my favourite of all of these is the Budget Enduring Spider deck that we've got here. And this is a deck that's more control-y compared to all of the other ones here. Most of the other ones are aggro, with the Demacia deck being more mid-rangey. But this one is very much a control deck, trying to survive and get through the early game with a lot of low chump blocker minions. You've got the Aristocrat, Omenhawk, Sentry, etc. You have Elise, which is a starting champion, and the Tryndamere, which is also a starting champion. So these guys won't cost you anything to craft, so you can, jump right into this deck. And they're very key. The Tryndamere is kind of your finisher, along with They Who Endure, which is only, a rare card, so not too bad to craft. Ruination's epic, so you don't necessarily need this if you don't have the way to get it, but it's a decent control tool with the Tryndamere. You can destroy the whole board and resurrect him. And yeah, the concept is to swarm the board, get a lot of spiders down with Elise, with Brood Awakenings and all of these 1-drops and whatnot. Blighted Caretaker as well works very well here. Normally the deck would be running Thresh, but instead you've got Tortured Prodigy, which also is doing the same purpose as Thresh really, which is to benefit from when your guys die. Thresh would be better though, so if you have him you can put him in for those guys. And really you're just surviving with Withering Wails, Grasp and Vile Feast, a lot of drain, a lot of defensive spells and defensive units, and you're allowing a lot of your guys to die blocking and attacking, which will buff up your They Who Endures to really obscene strengths, and you can then finish the game out with Atrocity onto those for big damage on the opponent's Nexus. So very cool deck, kind of more a controlling style. I can recommend this one. I've been playing the full list, which will be on the Mobalytics page for you if you want it. And it's been going very well, so definitely can recommend this one as well. Lots of spider synergy and unit dying synergy, which is very cool. So yeah, that's the 5 budget decks I've got for you. I think those are probably the strongest things at the moment that I could come up with that will really cost you not that many scraps, not that many gems to get a hold of. And of course, I'll be posting some more, fully fleshed out decks and gameplay in the coming days for you to experiment around with and try yourself if you do have the collection to support that. Anyway, hope you're enjoying the game. Hope you're having a good time. And yeah, thanks a lot for watching, guys. I'll see you next time. Bye.